Hey, Chris Baker here with a bit of a book reading for you from the SNES Omnibus, Volume 1, A through M. Let's talk some Superman.
Based on DC Comics' popular The Death of Superman and The Reign of the Supermen storylines, this game finds Doomsday destroying Metropolis and fighting Superman to the death. Depending on the level being played, gamers will control Superman or one of the four pretenders to the throne: Eradicator, the Cyborg, Superboy, or Steel. Each character has a special weapon, such as heat vision or energy blasts, and a special attack, such as hover blasts or bombs, but most of the time is spent punching or jump-kicking the game's chainsaw-wielding thugs, dynamite-throwing bad guys, and other enemies. Gameplay evokes Final Fight and Streets of Rage, but with more redundant attacks and enemies. Each character can fly during standard levels and in a few side-scrolling shooter stages, which are ridiculously easy, but walking is the more frequent mode of getting through most areas. You'll also ride elevators and dodge falling rocks. There are 10 levels of play: Siege of the Underworlders, Doomsday in Metropolis, Assault on Cadmus, The Last Son of Krypton, Ambush at Coast City, The Metropolis Kid, Steel Rain, Metropolis Ground Zero, The Engine's Core, The Return of Superman, and once again, the world is safe. You'll use lots of continues to see them all. This is one of the better looking and playing Superman games for any system, which admittedly isn't saying much, but it is fun. Very similar to the Genesis version.
When Superman number 75, featuring the death of Superman, was published in 1993, I was the co-owner of Fantastic Comics and Cards in North Richland Hills, Texas, a suburb of Fort Worth. It was a huge media event, but unfortunately, the day before the issue came out, I had totaled my car and was out looking for a new vehicle. This left the lone employee working the store all day by himself, swamped fielding phone calls and taking pre-orders. Fortunately, I did report for work the next day when the issue was on the stands. Like most every other store in the country, we quickly sold out. The video game tie-in arrived later with far less fanfare, but I enjoyed it and still break it out from time to time. There aren't many good Superman video games. Superman for the NES and Superman for the Nintendo 64 are two of the worst games I've had the displeasure of playing. So the death and return of Superman stands out as being distinctly playable.
Back in 1994, I loved beat-em-ups. And I loved comic books. Okay, so maybe that's me today too. In every way, I was the target audience for the death and return of Superman, and I simply could not wait for this video game adaptation of arguably the biggest event in comic book history to come out. When it did, I played through it, and I moved on, not loving or hating it. Unlike, say, Maximum Carnage, which made me an even bigger Spider-Man fan, Death and Return just kinda came and went. Not something you're used to hearing about games developed by Blizzard, huh? The game shipped close to a year after the comic event ended, which makes one of my biggest gripes with it inexcusable. Namely, it just doesn't tell the story very well. One major example of this: in the comics you at least feel some degree of betrayal by Cyborg Superman once he reveals himself to be the villain of the story, because he's done a series of truly heroic things. In this game, all he does is beat up the only slightly corrupt Cadmus Corporation guards in level 3. By the end of level 5, you as the Eradicator are already fighting him out of the blue with no real sense of, "Whoa, you totally betrayed us, dude," that you get from the comic. They cut corners everywhere else, too. This isn't a super long game, yet it recycles environments among different Supermen, and it rehashes enemy sprites in different contexts. A Cadmus Sky Sentinel and a flying alien from Warworld should have nothing in common, yet they look and fight exactly the same outside of a palette swap. To that end, the key enemy figure from Warworld, Mongol, is nowhere to be found in the game, nor are certain other important characters, like Supergirl, Lex Luthor, the Guardian, Green Lantern, and the entire freaking Justice League of America. All that, and Superman can die by Molotov cocktail. That's pretty lame. What you just listened to was recited from just one of the more than 400 pages in the SNES Omnibus Volume 1, with Volume 2 coming next year. If you'd like to read about another 350 or so Super NES games in a similar manner, I think this book is definitely for you. The 3 parts of the write-up were typical of what you can expect in the book as well. The first part, read by Chris Clow of the excellent Comics to Consoles podcast, was a pure description of the game, written by Brett Weiss, who also contributed his own memories and his voice in the next segment. The final part was me personally reading what Brett refers to as an insider insight in the book. He asked dozens of games industry writers and professionals to pen their own takes on Super NES games, and I'm honored to have been part of it. Also, thank you to Schiffer Publishing for providing me with a copy of the book to work from. And if you'd like to buy a copy for yourself, you'll also help support this channel by clicking on the Amazon link in the description below. I also wrote insider insights for a couple of Batman games, Justice League Task Force, Castlevania Dracula X, and at least a couple of other random games. Do you have any memories of your own for the death and return of Superman? I'd love to hear your thoughts, and incidentally, I have a lot more to say about this game in the future myself. So please, follow Spider-Ham's advice if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Probably after Spider-Man PS4, to be honest.